Hello, Miss Wolf's class. Today we're going to finish Revolutionary War on Wednesday. Chapter 7. Spies. "What are you doing here?" George Washington asked. The commander-in-chief sounded furious. "We made a mistake," Jack said. We didn't mean to come." George Washington turned to the rowers. "Who let these children sneak aboard?" he said in a stern voice. The men looked at Jack and Annie with surprise. "It's not their fault," Annie said quickly. "They were working too hard to notice us." Just then the boat banged against the ice. The ice cracked and the boat moved on, then bumped against the shore. Two soldiers jumped out and pulled the boat up on the shore. George Washington looked at Jack and Annie. "This boat is returning to get more men," he said. "When it does, you two will get out and stay on the other shore." "Yes, sir," said Jack. He felt very embarrassed. George Washington then gave orders to the rowers. "Make sure these children do not board any other boats when you return," he said. The general stepped onto the riverbank. The wind started to pick up. The snow fell harder. Excuse me. The crew unloaded the boat, and neither Jack or Annie spoke. Jack was miserable. They had caused trouble for George Washington, just when the general was trying to make America an independent nation. Jack desperately wished he and Annie had gone home earlier. They watched more and more boats land on the riverbank. As soon as the soldiers unloaded their weapons and horses, a freezing rain began. Now rain, snow, and sleet fell together. Jack heard George Washington call to one of his men. "The storm is getting worse, Major," the general said. "Yes, sir," the major said. "I think we're in for a blizzard," said Washington. "Yes, sir. Our mission may be hopeless, sir. Shall we call it off?" "No, you shouldn't," whispered Jack. "You're going to win." "Should we turn back, sir?" the major said. "No, no," said Annie. She stood up. The boat rocked. Don't turn back, George Washington, sir. You have to march on, sir. You have to attack the Hessians, sir." "Shh." Jack tried to pull Annie back down. "We're not supposed to know about their secret mission." "How does she know our plans, Major?" George Washington asked. "Listen to us, sir," said Annie. "You're going to win." She pulled away from Jack and jumped out of the boat. "Annie!" Jack leapt onto the riverbank. He scrambled after Annie up the steep, icy slope. "You have to lead your men, General Washington, sir. The Hessians will be surprised. They think no army would be marching on a night like this." "How do you know all this?" the major shouted above the storm. "How do you know what the Hessians are doing and thinking?" For once Annie seemed at a loss for words. She just guessed," said Jack. Just then, the bearded soldier who had yelled at Jack earlier stepped forward. There is George Washington. "I saw this boy earlier," he said. "He was writing things down." "No, I was just—" Now Jack was at a loss for words. "Seize them," the major shouted. "They're spies." These are the times. Jack grabbed Annie's hand. "We're not spies," he said. He whirled around to face George Washington. "General Washington, remember those words you said to your men?" Jack said. "You should believe them for yourself, sir." "What are you talking about?" George Washington asked. He yanked the captain's letter from his bag. By the light of the lamp, he read the words the captain had copied for his children. "These are the times that may try men's souls," Jack read. "But he that stands now deserves the love and thanks of men and women. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Jack looked at George Washington. Even if things look impossible, you should keep going, sir. The harder things seem, the greater the triumph, right? That's what you read your men. You have to keep going for their sake. Yes, and you have to keep going for our sake, said Annie, for the sake of the future children of America, sir. As the wet snow hissed about them, George Washington stared a long moment at Jack and Annie. Finally, he put his hand on each of their shoulders. I do not know who you are, he said. I do not know how you know what you know, but I believe you. For your sake and for the future children of America, we will march on. Yea, cried Annie. Yea, said Jack softly. He sighed with relief and put the captain's letter away. Now, get back in the boat, said George Washington. You must leave the fighting to me and my men. Jack felt grateful to George Washington and his whole army. They were risking their lives for all of America's children, past and future. He could barely speak. Thank you, sir. Thank you both for telling me to listen to my own advice, said George Washington. He called to the rowers waiting in the boat. Take good care of these two. George Washington climbed onto his horse. He looked down at Jack and Annie. Merry Christmas, he said. Then the commander-in-chief rode away into the stormy darkness. Chapter 9. Flash. All aboard, one of the rowers called. Jack and Annie hurried down the steep riverbank and climbed back into the boat. The crew pushed away from the shore. The boat started backing through the icy churning waters of the Delaware River. Jack was freezing in the sleet and snow. But he didn't worry about that now. He was thinking instead about how they had helped George Washington. He was thinking about how they had helped keep history on course. Jack felt better. When they got to the riverbank, Jack and Annie jumped out of the boat. Thanks, Jack yelled to the rowers. With the wind in their backs, Jack and Annie took off through the blizzard. They ran down the icy bank of the Delaware River. Thunder rumbled in the snowy sky. Lightning zigzagged over the woods. How will we find the treehouse? Said Annie. I don't know, said Jack. But don't worry, we'll find it. Hey.
You reading? You doing your recording?
He felt very confident now after meeting George Washington, after being thanked by George Washington. He and Annie ran through the rain, the snow, and the sleet. They ran along the riverbank until a bright flash of lightning lit up the sky. Then Jack saw it. The treehouse was directly to their left, high in a tall tree covered with snow. Over there, he shouted. Jack and Annie ran towards the edge of the woods. In the dark, Jack looked up, searching for the treehouse. Lightning lit the woods again. Jack saw the rope ladder flopping wildly in the wind. He grabbed it. Annie, he called. Here, she said. Let's go, he said. They climbed up the swaying ladder and scrambled into the treehouse. They were soaking wet and covered with slush and snow. Annie grabbed a Pennsylvania book. I wish we could go there, she shouted. The wind blew even harder. The tree started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still, absolutely still. Chapter 10. This Peaceful Place. The gray early light spilled into the treehouse. Birds sounded in the trees. The summer wind felt warm and gentle. Jack and Annie were wearing their nice dry clothes again. Oh, man, said Jack. It's good to be home. Yeah, said Annie, sighing, back in this peaceful place. Jack put the captain's letter out of his pack and turned it over. It was addressed to Molly and Ben Sanders, Apple Tree Farm, Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. Molly and Ben lived on a farm near these woods over 200 years ago, said Jack. Annie gently touched the letter. Your dad is going to make it home, kids. He misses you, Annie whispered, as if she could send comforting words back through time. Jack carefully placed the special writing from the Revolutionary War next to the writing from the Civil War. Look, Annie said. She picked up a note lying in the corner. It simply said, "Come back on Tuesday." Another message from Morgan, said Annie. Jack smiled, pulled on his pack. See you on Tuesday, Treehouse, he said. He started down the rope ladder. Annie followed. It was early daylight. They ran through the Frog Creek woods. Then they ran down their street. They climbed onto their porch and rested against the railing. They looked out at the dawn sky. Jack remembered the whoosh of the cold wind on the Delaware. He remembered the hiss of the wet snow and the slosh of the icy waves. He remembered George Washington reading to his men. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph, Jack whispered. Those words are true, said Annie. It was a hard conflict. And I feel kind of glorious right now, don't you? Jack laughed. Very definitely, he said. Then he and Annie slipped into their quiet, peaceful house. The end. Long ago, the United States was made up of 13 small colonies. Many of the early settlers or colonists thought of England as their mother country. They were proud to have come from England, and they felt great loyalty to the British. Over time, though, many colonists wanted to be independent. They didn't want a faraway country to rule over them. These people were called patriots. In the spring of 1775, fighting broke out between the Patriots and the British in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. That summer, a group of American patriots met in Philadelphia and began to organize an army to fight the British. They made George Washington their commander-in-chief. After the Patriots won independence, over 8 years later, Washington resigned as commander-in-chief. He returned to the life of a gentleman farmer on his plantation in Mount Vernon, Virginia. 6 years later, in 1789, George Washington was elected the first president of the United States. Thomas Paine. At the beginning of the Revolutionary War, some colonists did not want to break away from England. These people were called Tories. In January 1776, a British writer named Thomas Paine wrote a powerful essay that attacked the idea of obeying a king. Paine called his essay Common Sense. It inspired many Tories to join the Patriots' cause. Almost a year later, in December 1776, George Washington's army was losing the war. Many soldiers wanted to give up. This time, Thomas Paine wrote a series of essays called The Crisis. George Washington had the crisis read aloud to his troops on the bank of the Delaware River. Paine's words inspired the troop to continue to fight. They crossed the Delaware River, defeated the enemy, and gave new hope to the whole Patriot army.